If you are here, you wish to know. Welcome to What's News This Week, a weekly series where I speak about different releases that I found interesting so I could keep up and you also don't miss out on new video game releases and stuff to watch. The first thing we're gonna talk about is Firefly Village, which is another usual Stardew Valley-like cozy farming game with different characters that you can be friends with and romance, you know, the usual. Just another, like, simple fun time. Dungeon Stalkers! It's a PvP game, like a Dungeon Born or another fantasy game, and you will go to dungeon with different people and try to retrieve whatever you can, and the other team will try to mess with you. And the difference from the previous two games that came out, Dark and Darker? Yeah, Dark and Darker and the other names that I forgot. Now, there's anime characters. There's different anime characters, and that's all the difference. I'm sure it will be enough for different people to try this game out. Full-on City Brawl! So there's 4 playable characters in this beat 'em up. One of them is a girl mechanic who's monkey wrench that uses his boomerang. And a police guy with a shotgun. And as per usual, you'll be walking around from side to side and beat up all the enemies that come at you. And there's 4 playable characters. It seems dynamic and just fun. Echoes of the End. Did you play God of War 2019 and God of War Ragnarok? It's action-adventure when you and your companion will travel the fantasy realm and you will fight with enemies and solve puzzles. And that's pretty much it. It could be something interesting. There's like a story about a girl that lost a brother and now she must have revenge on evil people that took him away from her. There's older dudes that will help her out. Hopefully it would be like a normal and good story. There's a possibility of it, but not much. But we all can hope. Iwakura Aria. So it's 1960s Japan, and there's some secret in the manor. You will play as a new mate that got into a manor, and it just so happens that you need to figure out what the secret is, because there definitely is some there, and that's pretty much it. You will find out some secret in a manor in a different time in Japan, and we'll explore the manor and like speak with different characters in order to find out what is happening over there. Ovis Loop! So it's a cyberpunk roguelike Metroidvania when you play as a ship with a giant sword and you beat up cyberpunk wolves. The premise already is fun, so I do hope it would also would be a cool game. So eventually we'll find out what it's all about. Mononoke the movie Chapter 2, The Ashes of Rage. So there's also not one movie of Mononoke on Netflix, there's also a second one, and I suppose there will be a third one. And Mononoke is a series of like detectives with apparitions or yokai, where the main character must find out the truth and then he will turn into OP warrior and fight with apparition in order to solve a mystery. It was a fun TV show. I didn't watch the first movie. I probably need to do this, and maybe I'll watch the whole trilogy when it comes out. But it's definitely a fun and unusual experience for many anime watchers. A Spartan Dream. So there's a guy and his father, they struggle in their little restaurant, but they have a house in Greece. And what they decided to do? Young guy decided to travel to Greece and sell the house, but he find out there's a lot of his relatives living there and happy, and there's a girl that they raised. She's an orphan, this family raised her, and the guy of course fell in love, and now they must find another way to make money in order to, so he could return not empty-handed, and they would not sell a house. It might be like a fun dramedy about life and stuff. And unfortunately, that's all that I've found interesting this week. So, if you want the channel to live and grow, please support me here on all social media, share my videos with anyone using for sharing, not just platforms from YouTube to Twitch to Trovo to Blue Sky to Twitter to whatever. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next videos and streams. Bye!